If everything is essentially God's will, does it mean that it's God's will for us to suffer? Why is there so much disease, frailty, and injustice in the world? In today's episode, we will attempt to explain exactly that. It is written in the Urantia Book that God says to the mortal races,
"In all your afflictions, I am afflicted."
Located in 3:6.6. After all, the very spark of God themselves is not only dwelling inside of you, but has a complete mental and experiential account of your entire life. So such a statement must be true, right? I mean, God wouldn't subject themselves to suffering if there wasn't some sort of benefit. Despite God ultimately being one entity, we learn in the Urantia Book that his expression is through multiple beings. Whether you want to believe in the sacred Trinity, or by their extension, their paradise sons or administrative family that performs and shares in authority and power of the first source and center, such as the Ancients of Days or the Master Spirits, the fact of the matter remains that everything is God anyways. I mentioned the exhaustive expression of God to open up your minds as to the newer manifestations of God, which include the supreme, ultimate, and absolute. Since our direct mission is to experience time, space, and creature fallibility to serve the actualizing experiences of God the Supreme. Despite there being many representations of why we suffer, to help you conceptualize today's concepts, the ultimate goal associated with suffering directly relates to the following passage, located in 118.10.9, indicating,
Most of what a mortal would call providential is not. His judgment of such matters is very handicapped by lack of far-sighted vision into the true meanings of the circumstances of life. Much of what a mortal would call good luck might really be bad luck. The smile of fortune that bestows unearned leisure and undeserved wealth may be the greatest of human afflictions. The apparent cruelty of a perverse fate that heaps tribulation upon some suffering mortal may in reality be the tempering fire that is transmuting the soft iron of immature personality into the tempered steel of real character.
So in other shop metal terminology, an unyielding piece of metal will break, whilst, like the best Japanese sword making, constitutes greater techniques of folds and hammering onto a piece of steel that yields superb craftsmanship, strength, and character. In psychology, we know that if something is stagnant and unbalanced, that this can lead to various psychopathologies, while a person that is flexible and resilient often benefits from various trials and tribulations that they derive meaning from. To receive benefit is not only representative of positive emotions, but rather gaining an advantage or profit from the encounter. Even a person that experiences both health and wealth can suffer in their own way, which can be best described by my experience visiting a private military college that I was once accepted to in my earlier years. I remember when I visited the college, I immediately found myself as being out of place compared to most of the other student population that appeared to be majorly from higher socioeconomic families, which was evidenced by their expensive cars that they drove, designer clothing that was worn, and other attributes as to what my former therapist coworkers and I used to affectionately call Essex syndrome. This syndrome was a pattern of behaviors we'd experienced by our higher economic class patrons out of Essex, Connecticut, where families would frequently display behaviors of projected perfectionism, themes of over-control, and varying degrees of low distress tolerance. After all, if one comes into the world through convenience or privilege and not adversity, there are most certainly consequences that leaves a mark on such an individual. Consequently, these undisclosed behaviors were subconsciously witnessed by me during my initial tour at what I perceived to be an elitist private military college, which is one of the few influencers that encouraged me to enlist in the United States military instead of becoming an officer. In the Urantia Book, suffering is portrayed not as punishment, but as an inherent part of mortal or creature experience that fosters growth and understanding. This includes all the creature limitations involving intellect, ability, and what others deem as being unfortunate circumstances. In 3.5.14, the book asks the existential question,
Is pleasure, the satisfaction of happiness, desirable? Then must man live in a world where the alternative of pain and the likelihood of suffering are ever-present experiential possibilities.
This reference identifies the potentiality of the duality in life, and the reality that everything in life rests upon a spectrum. Don't believe me? Ask yourself whether you're a good or bad person. A one-word response would be an oversimplistic representation of who you truly are as a person, since we all have things to work on. Looking at things through a divine lens, I would imagine the antithesis to this statement could be viewed much like the movies Pleasantville or even The Truman Show, if perfection did exist, that such a monotony of constant good moods, perfect neighbors, and even beautiful days will eventually feel scripted to the point of monotonous fabrication. Again, monotony is another form of stagnation. After all, the original reason God divided themselves into three parts in the first place was the
Father's escape from personality absolutism,
found in 10.0.1. In the vast scheme of eternal creating, I would bet money that perfect worlds have and do currently exist. Other worlds or universes, with the exception of being, of course, Havona, located in 14.6.18. To understand the nature of suffering, we first have to understand the chief administrator of not our local, but super universe, who just so happens to be Master Spirit number 7. This number is more important than you might think when it comes to administrating the defined plan for the Master Universe. Let me give you some bearings here. Master Spirit number 1 is, of course, representative of the Paradise Father. Number 2, the Eternal Son, and 3, the Infinite Spirit. Moving on to Master Spirit 4 elicits the combination of the collaboration between the Father and the Son. 5 being the Universal Father and the Infinite Spirit. 6, of course, is the Eternal Son and the Infinite Spirit. And our own Master Spirit 7, who is a representation of the Father, Son, and the Spirit working as a triune, or more simply functioning as a single force. I like to think of it as the Triforce for you Zelda fans out there. Consequently, because of these varying representations of God's behaviors, God can function in 7 different ways, meaning that the number 7 is holy simply because it represents God's functioning as a whole. Master Spirit number 7 functions as the advisor and director for all ascending pilgrims to Havona, and in 16.3.15
is the source of personal and spiritual nature of God the Supreme,
and as such functions as a presiding head of the Council of the 7 Master Spirits. In other words, if we are trying to comprehend what type of attitude our future God, the Supreme, will likely have, we should look no further than our own Universe Master Spirit that is currently leading us due to the current non-contactability of the personality of the Supreme in our current universe age found in 16.3.19. Fun fact, many of the gods inside the Master Universe have children. God the Supreme is no different, whose child is named Majeston, who is created in functional liaison with the deity Absolute, located in 17.2.4. Majeston is a real infallible personality that specializes in instantaneous and simultaneous perceptions of events across the Master Universe, called reflectivity. Now, the creation of Majeston is important for us to realize since it was God the Supreme's first creative action. It is written in 17.2.5 that
the deity response to the creative wills of the Supreme Being and his associates was vastly beyond their purposeful intent and greatly in excess of their conceptual forecasts.
This is important to understand since the partially developed creature-knowing God, the Supreme, coordinating with the unbound reservoir of all deity potential known as the deity Absolute, was enough to create a being more powerful than anyone, not even the gods, could have predicted. Hence the might necessity in our God Almighty, and what sure strength and will that we are currently developing on this planet most certainly is helping to foster. Consequently, it states in 48.6.5 that
even as mortals, so have these angels been father to many disappointment. And they will point out that sometimes your most disappointing disappointments have become your greatest blessings.
Perhaps you can think of a time that catastrophe struck and you were all the better of a person or a family because of it. As one brief psychology example, therapists often say that once we lose anything, we quickly ascertain its true value. After all, there is no might without strength, and no strength without adversity. In 156.5.20, we learn that
the God-conscious mortal knows how bravely to endure unavoidable suffering. He is uncomplaining when faced by inescapable hardship.
These hardships are not always environmental, financial, or even physical, and they sometimes represent more of a spiritual opportunity, such as those found in 159.5.11, stating,
to return good for evil, to assert the will so as to become the master of the situation, to overcome evil with good, the positive and righteous method.
In 156.5.18, Jesus describes what some of these spiritual benefits can be when he said,
As you grow older in years and more experienced in the affairs of the kingdom, are you becoming more tactful in dealing with troublesome mortals and more tolerant in living with stubborn associates? Tact is the fulcrum of social leverage, and tolerance is the earmark of a great soul. If you possess these rare and charming gifts, as the days pass, you'll become more alert and expert in your worthy efforts to avoid all unnecessary social misunderstandings. Such wise souls are able to avoid much of the trouble, which is certain to be the portion of all who suffer from lack of emotional adjustment. Those who refuse to grow up, and those who refuse to grow old gracefully.
Notice how Jesus accepts the creaturality of growing old, knowing that it's something that we must do. This forecast is something surely decreed by the administrators of our superuniverses. However, we should not worry in 9.1.8 when the text indicates that
the universe of your origin is being forged out between the anvil of justice and the hammer of suffering. But those who yield the hammer are the children of mercy.
Christ Michael is known to be a being that shows the characteristics of the universal Father and the eternal Son. However, he shares most of the motherly affection and understanding of our eternal Son, meaning we have a very nurturing and merciful system sovereign as our creator Michael that really wants all of us to do well. When people jest that the odds are stacked against them when referring to life's challenges, the enormous flexibility, guidance, and mercy we all receive proves a contrary bias. We learn in 54.6.3 that
such tribulations are transient afflictions. None of these can ever jeopardize your eternal prospects or deprive you of your divine right of paradise ascension and God attainment.
I often tell my clients that adversity or critical incidents in their lives afford us one of two opportunities. The first is to either become victim or succumb to the event, drowning in our own despair and frozen throughout the rest of our lives in simple survival mode, as do other creatures on the planet. Or, of course, the other alternative is to derive meaning through that event and to grow from that experience. However, we learn in 48.6.5 that
sometimes the planting of a seed necessitates its death, the death of your fondest hopes, before it can be reborn to bear the fruits of new life and new opportunity.
I am the very product of the aforementioned quote, and will not be making this video for y'all today if it wasn't for my own critical incidents in my own life that I once falsely believed was a proverbial brick wall. An obstacle today that you could probably notice that was stemming from me today was recovering from being sick recently, which means that my voice was a little off, that you probably detected. But with that said, thank you again for watching today's video, your continued support, and I will see you on the next one.